Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started in just another minute. Thank you. Once again, thank you for joining us today for our ACTS TDM webinar. We'll get started here in just another moment. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Casey Murphy and I am ACTS Director of Programs and Events. I want to thank you for joining us today for ACT's first of 2 webinars this month entitled Developing a Culture that Embraces Telework Post-COVID-19. Before we hear from our presenters this afternoon, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping items with you all. First, all attendees are on mute during this webinar. If you have a question or have a problem hearing us, please type it in the chat box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer your questions as the webinar gets going. Second, we will be hosting a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to type in your questions as we go in the Q&A box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Note, when asking a question, please also identify who the question is for when typing it in. Finally, this session is being recorded. We'll have the recording up on the ACT website within 24 hours after the presentation ends. Now, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce David Strauss, ACT's Executive Director. David?
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon, everybody. We have another great and timely topic today, so I'll keep my updates short. First, I want to thank you all for all of you that have joined us today. We know that many of you are working through some really challenging times, and the demands on your own time from work, family, are probably greater now than they've ever been, especially if you're like many of us, you have young children at home requiring you to channel your inner teacher. As the premier association for TDM professionals, our goal is to build a strong community of individuals and organizations working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within their communities. ACT is your organization for the latest information and best practices on TDM. During these challenging times, and it has been wonderful to see our members coming together online via email to talk through ideas, share insights, and help each other. If you're not yet a member, I invite you to join your colleagues and become a part of our community. ACT membership is highly valued and highly rewarding. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to update everyone on some of the happenings at ACT. On Monday, we saw the introduction in Congress of ACT's More Through TDM legislation. This historic piece of legislation would, for the first time, integrate TDM within federal transportation policy and provide new funding for the development and support of TDM programs at the state and local level. Now it is up to us as TDM professionals to build support for the legislation. I ask that all of you visit our website to download a template email to contact your member of Congress and encourage their support for this bill. Do you have interest in helping lead ACT? Next month, we'll be opening up nominations for ACT's board of directors, including our officer positions. ACT's board plays an important role in establishing ACT's long-term strategic vision and advancing our near-term strategies to achieve it. Now, a question on many of your minds is probably, what are we doing about our international conference this summer? We've been in regular communications with our hotel and hope that soon we will be able to make an exciting announcement about this year's event. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's webinar, Developing a Culture that Embraces Telework Post-COVID-19. The current pandemic has forced nearly all organizations to utilize telework as an emergency response to ensure continued business operations. For many, this has been their first experience with telecommuting. As an industry, we must ask ourselves, how do we use this experience as an opening to greater embracement of telecommuting for more people? In this webinar, you'll hear from 3 unique sectors and how they are implementing and encouraging greater long-term support for telework. You'll learn everything from developing a permanent telework program to expanding and implementing an agile solution for the future. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers. We have Heather Salem, who was a senior transportation program manager at Genentech, a biotech company in the San Francisco Bay Area. She manages the ferry, vanpool, and carpool commute programs. As a transportation nerd, she likes to practice what she preaches, and after COVID, looks forward to commuting with her tiny commuting buddy by train and bus. We have Roz Tucker, Managing Director of Mobility Services, Atlanta Regional Commission, who brings 25 years of experience navigating the intersection of mobility, human services, philanthropy, and community engagement. She brings a wealth of knowledge from the public, nonprofit, and private sectors, and has served in senior leadership roles with Prudential and IBM. In 2013, Roz joined the Atlanta Regional Commission and currently serves as the Managing Director of Mobility Services Group and the Georgia Commute Options Program. Roz also serves on the ACT Certification Board of Trustees. To kick us off, we have Elham Shirazi, who has over 30 years of experience in developing telework flexible scheduling programs. She's currently the chair of ACT's Telework Council, ACT's Telework and Alternative Work Hours Council. She has developed resource materials, conducted training workshops, worked with hundreds of employers, and evaluated the impacts of telework and flexible scheduling on employers, employees, and trip reduction. She has also helped develop regional telework resources and flexible scheduling and assistance programs throughout the U.S. In 2005, Elham was awarded ACT's Kathy Cole Telework Memorial Award for her achievements in the field. Elham, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. And I guess depending on which coast you're on, good morning or good afternoon. We are certainly living in very, very challenging and strange times. And although we're one nation, I have to say that, different states are behaving very differently at this point. Some states are opening up for business come June 1st. In California, we've been told that possibly we'll have shelter in place till the end of July. So, I think we're going to see a lot of differences in how the economy reopens. On one hand, we have, Twitter, which yesterday announced that they will allow their employees to telework indefinitely from here on. So I think that's a huge advance. And then we've got, Google and Facebook also joining that kind of parade, saying that at least till the end of the year, they're offering teleworking to their employees. So let me share with you a few things and insights. First of all, I want to make sure that we all understand that this is not normal teleworking. Normal teleworking was about, and should be normally about, somebody who's at home working alone, away from the distractions of the office, basically having some peace and quiet so they can work on their projects. And, maybe there'll be a meeting or two during the day, and it could be done through collaborative technologies. What we're seeing today, and I have data that supports this, is that this is extreme teleworking. It is not normal teleworking. It's everybody under the roof at one time. So as I'm sure that many of you are being challenged because you've got to work, you've got to provide homeschooling, you're doing childcare, you're cooking more than you ever expected, and on your break, maybe you're trying baking something. And it's a lot that's going on. So let's go to the next slide, please. This survey was conducted by CNBC, and it was done in April. It's a large group. It's close to 6,000 people who responded, and it was done actually based on 6 swing states to try and get, not to have, maybe the differences that we see based on, which way the states are going politically. Very interestingly, and I really want us as ACT members, although I'm a big supporter of telework, to remember that 60% of the population or close to it is not teleworking. So as much as we're so happy about this change, not everyone can telework. So keep in mind, there's that whole other group, that, let's go back, please, sorry, that are not able to telework. Of the 40% they're teleworking, half of them are new. So they had never teleworked before. Okay, now we can move on. Sorry about that. Actually, a recent study I was reading about from MIT this morning was saying that, that prior to COVID, about 4% of the US population was teleworking. And during COVID, it looked like 34%. So that's a huge jump. Now, our coworkers have definitely changed while we're teleworking these days. As you can see in multiple responses were allowed. This is based on a SHRM survey. All the citations are there. We're teleworking with our pets, with our significant others, large group with their children. And as you can imagine, this does cause some hardship and also does kind of make it a little difficult. But I have to share a funny anecdote that we were on a call with our beloved David Strauss while we're trying to strategize about teleworking in the future. And I keep hearing David going, okay, your move. Now, no. And then it looked like they were even changing places. I'm like, what is David doing? So finally, David cracks up in the middle of the meeting. He goes, I'm sorry, I'm playing chess with my little one. So, we've all seen that. That has become part of what's acceptable these days. And I think what we should also look at is that 14% live by themselves. So for those groups, isolation, depression can be big features. Okay, let's move on. SHRM was smart. They asked some questions about how many times people were interrupted. Well, majority 0 to 5, were 5% were, 66% were interrupted 0 to 5 times during the day. But look at that, 20% between 5 and 10. I mean, that's hard. And then it was very interesting to see, of course, we all now know, we're seeing everybody on video conferences. And most people do feel like they can show themselves. And I have to tell you, I don't always wear lipstick to get on every meeting anymore. And I do like, it's nice to have unplugged versions, of people where we can be a little bit more casual in our conversations. Hey, let's go to the next slide, please. Very interestingly, obviously, we always in teleworking tell people that it's important to have a designated workspace. But look, COVID happened and, I'm actually surprised that 52% have a home office. That's huge. I'm sure if we look at the Europeans, they don't have homes like Americans do, so they have a separate room. But 34% are working at the dining table. Can you imagine? You're sitting there, people are eating, the kids are probably there too. This is all very challenging. And I have to share with you my pet peeve, working on the couch and in bed, those give you bad posture. So yeah, let's go on. Korn Ferry, a lot of by the way, recruiting firms have done surveys, have found out that a large percent of people are finding it difficult to concentrate. And this is not because of telework, it's because they're watching the news. And this is one of the things we have to tell people to stop doing. If you're teleworking, stay away from the news. The same thing, you can catch up after work in an hour. or they're worried about the virus and, they're trying to work at home, at home with the kids. Let's move on. Now, this little data piece got me a little perplexed. So, of the 100% of people who are teleworking, 24% said yes, they want to continue. 55% said they want to go back to the office. And I think they're answering this question thinking that the office would mean normal. But I think we all know that going back to the office in the future is not going to be the same way that it was before. And 20% were unsure. So my big takeaway from this slide is, if we want the blue skies to stay, if we want traffic not to reappear as an industry, we got to make these patterns stick one way or another, by training, by getting more serious with organizations. And let's move on to the next slide. And continuing to make the business case for teleworking. So yes, we've made the case now for business continuity, but the return on investment for productivity purposes, 10 to 20%, in a typical well-planned program where the manager is trained, the employee knows what they're doing, is very possible. Flexibility, we all know that, and I've seen questions pop up. We'll get to these questions, don't worry, at the end. But we are, obviously the millennials, Generation X, Y, and Z, they really want, flexibility. And they're looking for jobs that offer them flexibility. I can tell you that I was a single parent. I had childcare in place, but I had to train my daughter at a very young age that, hey, I'm in the office, don't just jump in. And she has some great mommy dearest stories about how strict and horrible my rules were. But as soon as she started writing, I told her to, hey, put a little note under my door if it's important. And of course, as soon as she got the phone, she started texting me. But, we should be cognizant that children today, young adults, they're used to working from anywhere. So the last thing, they want to look for a company that offers that. Morale is a big booster. No, I didn't use wire hangers. Thank you, whoever that comment was from. And people often do say in focus groups, the day before I telework is my second favorite day of the week because I'm thinking about the next day, how I can get a lot done. My telework day is the best day. And the day after, I'm still happy because I didn't sit in the commute for a day. A lot of companies are now wisening up to overhead savings. We are going to see some shift. I'm not sure. Something like 30% of CFOs that were surveyed said that they are going to make considerations regarding overhead, but it's not, a lot of companies are thinking, do we need all this space if people are working remotely? And obviously, we do want to keep the blue skies. So let's move on, please. Are contracts, policies, or guidelines necessary? Absolutely. And what I mean by this is, if we want this behavior to stick, we better try and institutionalize teleworking at our organizations. What does that enable you to do? First of all, if you have a policy, you outline the parameters, it allows you, first of all, to be safe in terms of expectations for teleworkers and for the organization. Second, if the rules are transparent and you know what goes into selection, what goes into assessment, then you can accommodate much larger numbers of people into the telework arrangement, because otherwise you're going to live with the ones and the twos. So let's make the rules of engagement clear. Now, there are legal issues that you do need to be aware of. Do talk to your attorneys, but I'm just going to ramble a bunch of names right now. But, the FLSA rules do apply. So, don't go over 40 hours with your non-exempt. Can non-exempt telework? Absolutely. Why not? There are rules regarding workers' comp and home being an extension of the office, so have designated work areas that are clear. Are there rules around OSHA? OSHA does not expect you to do home office inspections. They did for one day, and oh hell, broke loose on Capitol Hill because they didn't want Big Brother to be watching. And by the way, for those employers who are considering using webcams to see if their employees are working, please don't go down that path. I've seen articles about it. Webcams are for collaboration. And I think the beauty of having a guideline, a policy, whatever you want to call it, is that it makes sure that the solution stays in place when we get to post-COVID. We don't know when that is, but even during. Okay, let's move on. This is a survey by Glassdoor, and actually it was done by Harris Poll on behalf of Glassdoor, which is another recruiting organization. I just want to show that, look, 70% of employees were happy that their employers let them work at home. 60% were confident that they could be efficient, and over 50% said that they were just as productive or more productive. Now, I think the golden rule of teleworking in a normal situation is if you're not at normal productivity and you're going below, then that your manager's got to work with you. If it doesn't work out, you come back to the office. It might be during this situation that you can't do that, but managers should not be shy of telling employees what they should change. Let's move on. I'm trying to keep the pace, so because I want to hear about, from Roz and Heather, myself. And the confidence in working remotely obviously goes up, by the younger the people are. Again, back to the fact that these, younger people are resilient. They know how to do this, and they're a lot more confident. And by the way, from a gender perspective, there doesn't seem to be huge differences, but it seems like men find it easier to work remotely and women a little bit less. Maybe that's because women take on some of the childcare issues. I know we're all dividing everything at home these days, but just could be that. And obviously, a lot of parents are, saying that that they can do things efficiently, although they do have children under 18 at home, but they have no other choice. Okay, let's move on. The top distractions, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Again, look at that TV popping up, TV, radio, turn it off. Some people are concerned about human interaction, but as we know, virtual collaboration has taken leaps and bounds. We thought we would be where we are today, maybe in 3 to 4 years. So that has just, it's been an amazing evolution. And I have to tell you, all of a sudden, I have a lot of data that I'm collecting on companies that have started, by the way, providing stipends for equipment and to pay off costs for broadband. This was not happening before. So we're seeing the introduction of some payments. And obviously childcare and, lack of social interaction as a parent are come up. Let's move on to the next slide. So what should you be tracking right now? I think as employers, please do track productivity. Again, make sure that you're seeing as to where is it performing well, for which jobs, for which employees. We're learning so much so fast. I think for people who had never managed teleworkers, they're going to come out of this having a lot of new tools and hopefully becoming stronger. This is a great time for people to improve their technology. A lot of organizations started even during COVID with 0 remote access. Today, at least most who are offering it, have remote access, they have collaborative tools. And, please keep, writing down about the lessons that are being learned, the questions that come up in the work environment, because, as issues come up and you've got solutions, it makes it a lot easier to move forward. Now, let's go to I'm hoping my last slide, which is, okay, what is the future of work at home? Excuse me for a second. No, I'm not sick. I've just been on so many virtual meetings that I'm losing my voice. Very interesting that I think there's a couple of things that are off the table right now. I'm seeing a lot of articles coming out about how right now, co-working, hoteling are not going to be entertained. Obviously, the sharing of space is not safe. So safety is a critical element in this reopening. First of all, as employers start planning now, get those policies in place, start thinking, sorry, what your plans are. By the way, a lot of people throw these terms essential and non-essential around very loosely. States have legal definitions of what they are, and please make sure that you're aware of what those definitions are. Some of the best strategies that I've heard about is to keep the non-essential employees teleworking so that essential employees can come to work with adequate space, and that social distancing and safe practices can be there. This is a time to make telework part of your culture. And, I would love to hear statements from more companies saying, we're going to allow this. This has worked, whether it's on a part-time basis or a full-time. Remember, one of the best solutions even going forward is a group A that works in the office 1 week while group B works at home. And, second week, group B works in the office and group A works at home. So you have time to cleanse and, again, have social distancing and provide, some of that safety. Manage the expectations. If you are in a company whose culture is not going to open up, then make sure people have a clear idea of when this is going to end. I've talked to some employers which say, June 1st, we expect everybody in the office. That's what they're saying. And some of the states are saying that's okay. So I think I've talked about technology and equipment and, those stipends changing. I'm hearing a lot from companies that are having to make sure that they have assigned times for casual conversations, because yes, are people zoomed out with business meetings? A little bit. We have to be careful. There is fatigue going on, but those casual conversations really keep up everybody's spirit. Not everyone's going to come out of this wanting to continue. However, I think people are going to be much better at determining, am I the right candidate or is this just not for me? So that will make it a lot easier on many employers. Or we may have many who will say, hey, I want to continue. So we better be prepared for the other side of it. And do consider, obviously, shift differentials, not having people there at the same time. I think, again, if I can say anything, I love teleworking. I wish more and more people could telework. We got to make these habits stick, but safety comes first. So I'm going to be quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you, Elham. Would you like to go ahead and turn it over to Roz?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, now breathing. Of course, I'd love to turn it over to Roz to share some great information that they've been collecting in Atlanta and some great work that they've been doing in actually the whole Metro Atlanta region for teleworking.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Roz Tucker with the Atlanta Regional Commission and Georgia Commute Options. I'm really excited to share with everyone just a brief summary of what we've been doing into COVID. So we kicked off, if you go back one slide just for a second. So we kicked off on March 12th. Our entire office went home. We were all sent home 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and with an unexpected time to return back to the office. And so, of course, that time ended up being to whenever necessary to come back. And so we had to roll out, actually on March 9th, we started putting together a telework guide. We said if this happens, we're in fact going to need to be able to provide some resources to employers in our region. And you can go to the next slide. So we started putting together how to be productive during COVID-19. We also needed to, we are an MPO, and along with being an MPO, we have a lot of supports that we provide to local and county governments. And they were really scrambling to figure out how they were going to pull this off. Of course, with most county governments, there are tons of essential workers, but there are a lot of workers who are public facing. And so at the various entities that the public would interact with, a lot of those services could not stop. However, they were not necessarily positioned to telework because it's not something that they had embraced before or were even able to do. And they turned to ARC quickly to say, help us out, we've got to get this going. So in addition to the trainings that we provided for our region's employers and our employer partners, we did trainings to our local and county governments as well. So roughly about 200 individuals, county managers, HR directors, and even some elected officials were a part of learning about how to quickly launch a telework program. And we're very proud of the knowledge that was gained across this particular group. In fact, employers are very familiar with our program, and they understand the importance of TDM across the region. But we've been really wanting to saturate the policy level across the region. And so we've heard some say that there was a silver lining to all of this. And I think the silver lining to all of that's gone on and is still going on in our region is that we have been able to get in front of policymakers who now are thinking differently even about TDM, and definitely thinking differently about teleworking and what it means to their organizations. And so I'll talk a little bit more about where we've landed. Next slide. This is a link to our quick guide. I'll just take you here for a moment. Our marketing team created a graphic and put up on the site. What's so unique about this is though, or maybe not so unique, but you can assess the guide, but you have to put in contact information. And I'll tell you that from this, we've generated over 100 leads to set up telework programs across the region. And this has been tremendous. And many of those leads are also inclusive of some of our local and county governments. And just kind of wanted to show you that. So we've utilized our media platforms to reach folks across the region who needed help quickly. And then we've been very engaged with local media. We had an interview with Curbed Atlanta. It's a really, really popular newsletter magazine type who did a story on teleworking. I was able to interview with them myself, and it was pushed throughout the region. We had several news stations feature us on their shows talking about teleworking. And really what I set out to impress upon the region was, of course, as Elham said, this is not your normal type of teleworking, first of all. But secondly, that this was the world's largest telework experiment, and definitely the region's largest telework experiment, and that it would be the tipping point for teleworking in the region. Next slide. I want to point out some of the, I don't know how well you can see these, but our marketing team, they're amazing, and they jumped in and started featuring some of the key stories of an artist working from home now, just a blurb on making sure you wash your hands and how to best telework and set up your workspace. Some notes here you'll see about social distancing and how teleworking can work. And we also took the time to feature some of our transit workers who could not telework, right? And our transit system, the largest transit system here, this worker happens to be with MARTA, the Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. And we featured over a series of over a week, transit workers doing various things, sanitizing the buses and the rail systems. And just to show our support to what our transit partners were doing, and then just other info on teleworking. Now I want to get into, so this has kind of been a three-pronged approach, or phase, if you will, a three-phased approach. It was first to help the region get through the crisis of everybody's home, let's get a telework program going, where folks had never talked about it, now having almost, having 100 leads and having over 35 organizations in the pipeline ready to set up a policy. Now we knew what we wanted to understand for a number of reasons. Being an MPO, we love data. We wanted to understand not only what was the landscape prior to COVID-19, how did things go during COVID-19, and then what are your thoughts for the future of teleworking post-COVID-19? And so the Georgia Commute Options team put together a survey. We sent this out on April 20th, and we left it out until May 1st. And we received back just shy of about 10 shy of 3,000 responses, and a very mixed response in terms of the sectors, private, public, just a really great academia. We have a really great collective of responses. We want to form a strategy for companies to re-enter the workforce. But we knew that we needed to do that and have that messaging built around data to say, this is what regional employers, this is what commuters have said, and we wanted to understand even their palette for transit going forward and kind of what they're thinking about that. And so we started asking those questions, and particularly around teleworking, we do see a great opportunity to impact congestion here in the region. And so asking those questions, and then part two of that is that we held focus group interviews, if you will, with C-level executives across the region. We wanted to know from them as well in terms of what they were thinking about how this great telework experiment or this large telework experiment has worked, and the benefits that they've seen from it. So I'm gonna go through just some of the general survey. It was three-pronged. So once you identified, it has skip logic. You either identified yourself as an employee, a commuter, as a manager, or as an executive or C-level person at the organization. If you could go back one slide. And of course, I do want to point out over 30% of respondents worked at an organization that had 500 or more employees. So that's pretty big here, meaning that the footprint of these organizations is pretty large. We'll go to the next one. And again, just a little bit of data. In our region here, just shy of 80% are working from home currently. That's a large number. We also wanted to understand prior to COVID-19 if folks were supervising employees who teleworked. And prior to, you can see here that it's just shy of 40%. And so that's giving us insight in terms of even the things that we might need to, we've provided training for supervisors and managers, but that gives us a little more insight in terms of if we continue this at the level that we're doing this, we might need to provide a little more support in that area. Next slide. We also asked to what degree has work from home teleworking policies and resources been responsible for their organization's ability to continue operations. This was a really important question because when we talk about teleworking, we present it as a mode, and we also really push in our region the business continuity part of it. There are many, many more benefits of teleworking that we are all very familiar with, but one of the major things is the business continuity here. So as you can see, just shy of 67% said teleworking is the main reason that they were able to continue their business operations. And as we were able to dig down into the C-suite comments, several said that one person would complete 3 days worth of work normally that took 3 days in 1 day. And so there's a huge amount of appreciation for the level of productivity that C-suite is seeing out of teleworking, even those who may have pushed back against teleworking in the past. Next slide. This one's got a lot here. I will say I want to kind of give a clause here as well. We just, this is hot off the presses as of yesterday. So we're still working with a lot of raw data, but there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be able to dig down into. And next week, we'll be able to send out a full summary of the data and of the surveys to the executive level and to the commuters. And we'll be happy to share this out. But one of the questions that we asked, recognizing that there are many unknowns, how do you think that COVID will change how employees at your organization work in the future? That was huge. And as you can see here, again, almost 70% are saying that more employees will be teleworking after this. And then even the second tier, the more often is quite a high number. And they were very candid. Which of the following best describes your position? As you can see here, again, the survey takers, but we had a large swath of managers and quite a few C-suites that took this particular survey, in addition to our focus groups. Next slide. Again, this is just some more information on how often are folks currently working from home. Again, here, just to back up what we'd already shown. Next slide. Now, this question is very insightful. Ties into some of the stuff that Elsham was talking about. Prior to COVID-19, was teleworking common practice here? And as you can see, for 41%, it was not. And so that's quite interesting. And for some, 38, almost 39%, for select roles and select positions, it was commonplace. But for almost 20%, you know, it was widely available, but the vast majority, it was not. And the next one I want to lift, and these are just a few of the questions, and I want to show you the largest ones that I think the most impactful ones. Thinking about your experience working from home since COVID-19, have any of the following been impacted negatively? And these are various, but access to technology, and it goes on. And you can, as we share these out, you'll be able to take a look at them. But some of the main things that you might see here, connectivity is 25% here, just kind of, and then you'll see the home workspace, you know, 33% saying that, you know, it's not the same quality as at work. And then you'll see, you know, none of these have negatively impacted me. So that's a fairly large group here as well. But I think that the technology piece was the big piece. And then, have you experienced any of the following personal challenges since working from home? We wanted to also surmise what some of those personal challenges were. I won't go through everyone here for sake of time, but we did want to surmise what some of the personal challenges were, because that's going to help us to inform and to educate or to provide support, whether it's to the employer or to the employees, those who are teleworking in the future for our next phase of the strategy. Again, this is getting into the tools. As we all know, it's very difficult to telework if you do not have the tools. We had to help some of our, particularly some of our local and county governments, really working hard to get laptops for everybody and making sure that folks had, we talked about the bandwidth and the internet access and those capabilities. Those things are critical. And even the conversation trending across the region as a state, and making sure that as we go forward, because we know everybody's not going to be able to come back into the office all at once, there will be a level of teleworking that remains in place for an undetermined amount of time. that these elements would have to be in place. And so we again wanted to hear from the region on what some of the issues were there. Next slide. This is sort of reiterating what we've talked about a little bit, but how often did folks telework prior to the outbreak if they were teleworking? Next slide. And then again, in our region, we asked, how frequently would you choose to work from home after business returns to normal? And as you can see here, a large swath is saying 3 to 4 days, 29, almost 30% here, 3 to 4 days per week. And a lot of organizations are saying the same thing, that we will probably never return to normal, that we will stay in some state of a large percentage of folks teleworking for probably into the end of 2020. If you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to me. This is just a small sample of the survey. We have a comprehensive survey, and I would be more than happy to share all of the findings with you. And even if you are interested in doing something similar in your area, we would be more than happy to share that with you as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roz.
You're welcome. And I'm excited now to hand it over to Heather Salem with Genentech. And Heather's going to share about their 4-phase plan for returning their employees to work. Thank you, Heather.
Yes. Thank you, Roz. So I'm a senior transportation program manager at Genentech, and we are a biotech company in the San Francisco Bay Area. My team provides commuter transportation services to our employees, including buses, ferries, van pools, carpools, and incentivizing public transit. And my job is essentially to get people, to get the scientists to work so they can focus on the important research and manufacturing of medicines every day. And since the beginning of the pandemic, our transportation team's focus has really moved towards how do we keep essential business personnel safe? How do we provide them with enough transportation options to get to work if needed? And how do we help our employees as we move forward with whatever the new normal might be? And the next slide. Oh, that's Genentech. You can go to the next one. So before COVID, work from home was encouraged if your job function allowed it. We have a lot of researchers and people who need to work in labs and manufacturing locations. So obviously those roles can't be done from home. But for the groups where it did make sense, the usage actually varied widely between departments, and some groups would have mandated work from home days and others would allow it on an as needed basis. But on average, we found people worked from home about 8 to 12 hours per week. And we did see this in our ridership figures with overall reduced numbers, especially on Friday. And the reduction was seen in the number of cars coming onto campus every day. Once the pandemic came into place and the shelter-in-place order happened, all employees were mandated to work from home. That is, except for our employees who carry out the essential biotech business continuity activities, and they are allowed to come onto campus. And this has shown that what we found is it's shown a lot of employees that working from home is possible. And Genentech has been really great at providing guidelines and toolkits to show employees how to work from home successfully. And we believe that this has really contributed to being able to show people that we can work this way with fewer challenges than many had originally assumed. Although the biggest thing that people point out to us is that employees miss the face-to-face collaboration and the social aspects of coming into work every day. And so our transportation team's focus has now come into scenario planning and eventually what a phased approach to returning to campus will look like. You go to the next slide. And so really, we have a lot of assumptions, but not very many answers on what this is going to look like and how we are going to do it. But some of the things that I've been thinking about and that my team has been thinking about is working from home is going to become more normalized across all departments. And how do we as commuter professionals get those people to work and support those people? I'm assuming that that's going to mean a reduced number of riders, both because of more people working from home and also safety concerns related to COVID. and shared commuter options. We're also thinking about new ways of providing transportation options to support flexible schedules outside of regular commute hours. Part of the phased approach that we're looking at will probably include staggered schedules across different functions. So some people come in the first part of the week, some people on the second part of the week, and having a higher usage of what we call drop-in centers, which are leased remote offices that we have throughout the Bay Area so that people don't have to come all the way into work. They can go a short distance from their home and come into a drop-in center maybe for a specific meeting, or if they need like a particular type of a piece of equipment. We are just assuming that there's going to be terrible traffic, and how do we get people through that? And eventually, how do we convince people to start using these smart commute modes again, and find even more people to get those people on as well? You go to the next slide. And so our agile approach has really allowed us to pivot and meet the needs of our employees in this ever-changing landscape. And what we found is that by giving the employees the right tools and guidance to make work from home, they've been able to work from home successfully, and it has gone a lot smoother than a lot of people had originally assumed. And for my team in particular, for our transportation team, we're definitely thinking of working from home, not just as a guideline or policy provided by our company, but as a viable commute option that we're eventually going to want to support and encourage more people to do. And so that's just from the employer perspective, and I'll hand it back to Casey.
Thank you very much, Heather. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Roz, and thank you, Elham, for those great presentations. We do have some questions that were emailed in, and as well as up here on the screen. We're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. If we don't, I just want to let everyone know we do have all three of the panelists' contact information up on the screen here. Please feel free to reach out to them if your question is not answered. They will do their best to get back to you. This first one for you, Elham. What tips do you have for public agencies that may have collective bargaining agreements in place?
Actually, I've worked, excuse me, I've worked with a lot of public agencies that, you know, where labor unions were completely on board with teleworking. I think the best thing you can do is that when you have a steering committee, make sure that they are represented as you develop consensus across the organization about what your telework program will be like. I will give you an example. You know, County of LA has over 100,000 employees, many labor unions. We worked with them, and they actually adopted the same language that the county adopted for their policy within their unions, which basically said that teleworking is a workplace strategy, not benefit, not perk, not privilege. You don't want to use those words. And it is a workplace strategy that can be, you know, decided upon based on the job being appropriate, the employee being appropriate, and the technology being available, and the managers approving. You know, years ago, labor unions had bans on teleworking because it impacted their ability to be able to unionize. I don't think after this COVID experience, there's going to be a single union which will come out against it. And by the way, that has gone away. Most unions come on board as long as there's transparency and they're not left out. But this is not about seniority. Very important thing to keep in mind. Just because someone's senior does not make them a good candidate for teleworking. Sorry, that was too long an answer.
No, that's okay. We got a few more minutes. Thank you. This next one for you, Roz. How were you able to get so many survey responses? Did you provide an incentive? And this person is saying that they're working on a similar survey in Central Ohio right now.
That's a good question. So first of all, we used several platforms to get the survey out. We sent it out through our commuter program, so to all of our business partners, our corporate partners. We also forwarded it out through the MPO, so all of our local and county governments But we're also, we work with the TMAs. So all of our transfer, well, all except 2 that had already done their own surveys a little earlier. So 5 of the 7 also sent it out. And we also pushed the survey out through BusinessWise. We subscribe to that platform, and we utilize that as well. And we did provide an incentive. So we had, we gave each TMA 2 $25 or $50 gift cards so that they could have it exclusively for their TMA. And then Georgia Commute Options also provided incentives, and then we provided an incentive. So we're kind of layered, so more than one incentive where it was sent out. And then we had specific URLs for each survey so that we would know where that came back from. But yes, we did have an incentive.
Okay, great. This next question here, I think maybe most of you, all 3 of you might be able to add to this a little bit. I'll start with you, Elham, and then we can work our way down. What is the biggest barrier or challenge you are hearing from employers or staff right now?
It hasn't changed in over 30 years. I mean, the biggest barrier has always this transition from managing presence to managing real productivity. And, you know, it's just something that has always been the challenge. It's not technology. Look at where we are. It's ubiquitous, it's instant, it's perfect. It's still the culture. And I would say that if we want to see cultures change, because I see another question related to this, that culture change has to come from the top. So we don't need to, you know, employees know this works. Employees want to do it, and we want the right employees to do it. But the message for organizations to include teleworking as an acceptable strategy has to be supported by management and by middle management. So we need to make sure upper management opens the door and middle management gets the training they need to implement and stick to these programs.
Excellent, thank you. Roz, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just ditto exactly what you say.
What'd you say? Yeah. And I don't know, Heather, for you guys.
No.
This next one, you know, I'd be curious for, again, all 3 of you, and maybe, you know, I'm not sure if Genentech has anything in place, but, you know, someone myself who has young children at home and camp is still on the cusp here of actually happening, you know, what can employers do to support employees that may still have to have kids at home throughout the summer and possibly even into the fall?
I can speak about what Genentech has done. I have a 3-year-old at home, so I have personal experience with having to deal with that. And the message that we've gotten from our leaders is they're supportive. They understand that this is not a normal time, that this isn't normal telework or working from home situation, and that they've just asked that if you are having issues to work it out with your manager and figure out something that's going to work for you. Really, it's all about flexibility and what's going to work best for each individual person and their individual situation.
Okay. And I would concur with Heather's response to that. That conversation is trending in our region right now. There are several very large school systems that are considering staggering school days, even when school starts back in the fall, that they may not, for social distancing purposes, they may not be able to put all the kids in the building every single day. So maybe a certain alphabet comes on 2 days and the other come on the other 2 days. And then there's a day where they're not there, possibly to sanitize the building. And as an MPO, we're even having this conversation because it's going to impact our workforce. So if you have children home 2 days a week, the employer would have to be extremely flexible in working with the workers and to really have a robust telework program in place. You know, ARC has had a long-standing telework program, but we're going and we're changing, we're modifying, we're modifying our policy right now to be able to accommodate this type of situation if that in fact ends up being the case. So we could have parents, that are home 2 or 3 days a week for the remainder of the year, possibly.
Okay. Thank you. Elham, anything else?
And I'll just drop one. I think those both comments were fantastic. The only thing I would add to the discussion is between a manager and an employee, there has to be a discussion as to what are the core hours that the employee has to be available. And that discussion has to be very personalized right now, based on who's providing in a lot of families, parents are splitting childcare. Someone is doing it in the morning, someone in the afternoon. And also, I think it's important on Outlook to communicate what is personal non-available time, or whatever calendar you use, so that we just know that those are the hours that that it just can't be available.
Okay. And I know, I apologize, we have now reached the top of the hour, and I know there were a few other great questions that had just come in, and as I mentioned before, please, our panelists are here to help, and they're happy to answer any additional questions you have. So please feel free to reach out to them after this is over. I want to take a moment again and thank you, Elham and Roz and Heather, for presenting this afternoon. We had a wonderful turnout, and I think folks really enjoyed everything you had to offer. So thank you again. And I want to let folks know here today that we will have another webinar at the end of this month. It will be Thursday, May 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. The topic will be safe shuttle operations, maintaining and keeping fleets clean and safe for riders post-COVID-19. So once again, I'd love for you to join us at the end of May. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and thank you once again to our panelists for a wonderful presentation. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.